All NEET aspirants, you are listening to podcast Botany for NEET by S. Ramakrishna. In this podcast, the factors affecting rate of photosynthesis. The rate of photosynthesis determines the yield in plants as well as crop plants. In plants means oxygen production. In crop plants means the biomass in terms of the fruit, seed and leaves. And the factors, what are the factors which determine the rate of photosynthesis? External and internal factor. The internal factor, that is the plant factor, age, number, size, orientation of leaves, mesophyll and chloroplast. And these internal factors are plant factor determined by genetic predisposition and growth of the plant. Here we can encompass a point from genetics. Genes provide potentiality, environment provide opportunity, finally exhibition of the character, phenotype. So genetically it is potential, but environment is not favorable. In such condition, phenotype is not exhibited. Environmental conditions are favorable, but there is no genetic predisposition. In such conditions also, the phenotype is not exhibited. So internal or plant factor determined by genetic predisposition and also growth of the plant. That the growth of the plant depends upon number of factors, the soil condition, the pH and nutrient availability. Next, among these factors, one factor is predominant or that limits the process when present at suboptimal levels. Next, when the process is controlled by number of factors, the pace or speed of the factor limited by the factor present nearest to its minimal value. The factor present nearest to its minimal value, it is the factor, that is the minimal value. It is the factor that is going to determine the process. If it is increased, the process, the rate increases. But at higher concentration, again it becomes a limiting factor. Whenever a factor becomes limiting, rate automatically decline. Low quantity is also a limiting factor. High quantity is also a limiting factor. Suppose for example, despite of the leaf having chlorophyll, optimum light, carbon dioxide, the leaf do not perform photosynthesis because of low temperature. If increase the temperature, rate automatically increases. But at high temperature, not same. So whenever a factor becomes limiting, rate automatically declines. Next, the external factors, light, carbon dioxide concentration, temperature and water. Light. Effect of light on rate of photosynthesis is threefold: quality, intensity, duration. Quality, blue and red light. Intensity, when intensity of light increases, rate of photosynthesis increases. Of course, beyond its certain limits, it leads to destruction of the chlorophyll, what we call solarization. Such destruction prevented by accessory pigment like chlorophyll B, xanthophyll and carotenoid. And duration, because for excitation of electron of the chlorophyll is just only it is essential. So in intermittent light or discontinuous light, rate of photosynthesis is more, but continuous light, rate of photosynthesis it is less. So quality, intensity, duration. Next, there is a linear relationship between incident light and CO2 fixation at a low light intensity. In case of the graph given in text, that is A. Set A, what is the limiting factor? Low light intensity is limiting factor. If increase the light intensity, rate increases along the line of AB. Further increase of light intensity has no influence at BC because other factors become limiting. At BD, it is light saturation. At BE, it is maximum photosynthesis. Next, light rarely a limiting factor except of plants growing in shade and thick forest. Why? Because light saturation occurs at 10% of full sunlight. Because just for excitation of electron of the chlorophyll, light is essential. In case of the plants growing in shade and thick forest, beyond 10%, it requires more light, but diffuse light is available. That's why light rarely a limiting factor except of the plants growing in thick forest and shade. Next, the leaves of the same plant growing under bright sunlight, shady side, suppose a leaf kept in dark. What is the color? Leaf kept in case of the bright sunlight. In bright sunlight, there is every possibility of the destruction of chlorophyll pigment. That's why it is light green in color. In case of the shade, the plant struggle to receive the light. So, in search for the light, it produces the more amount of the chlorophyll. That's why it is dark green. In case of dark, whatever the chlorophyll present, it undergo destruction as light is not available. So existing chlorophyll destruction, there is no further formation of the chlorophyll because chlorophyll formation intimately linked to the light. So it is pale color. Next, carbon dioxide. The common limiting factor for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide concentration. What is the reason? Because its availability is low in atmosphere, 0.03 to 0.04%. If you increase up to 0.05, rate increases. Beyond 0.05, it is damaging to the plant because leads to closure of stomata. There is no gaseous exchange, productivity decreases. So, if you combine this point with the growth regulators, the natural anti-transparent in case of the plant is ABA, leads to closure of stomata. Here atmospheric anti-transparent leads to closure of stomata is high concentration of CO2. Next, C3, C4 plant respond differently to CO2 concentration at light intensities. The C3, C4 plant at low light intensities, neither of the plant C3 or C4 not responding to CO2 concentration. When high light intensity or light intensity increases, C3 and C4 respond differently to CO2 concentration. C3 plant shows saturation beyond 450 microliter in 1 liter of air, that is 450 ml, that is microliter, liter to the power of -1. Because light saturation occur beyond 450 ml L to the power of -1 because it requires much amount of for it is the CO2. In case of C4, the saturation is about, it is 360 ml L to the power of -1 because C4 plant can perform photosynthesis even under low concentration of CO2 because internal CO2 is available for C4 plant. So, current availability of CO2 limiting to C3 but not to C4. Why? C3 plant merely depends upon it is atmospheric carbon dioxide. C4 plant depends upon atmospheric carbon dioxide as well as internal CO2 available breakdown of the malic acid in case of bundle sheath cells. Next, high CO2 concentration for more productivity is exploited in case of the greenhouse crops like bell pepper and tomato. In bell pepper and tomato, they are grown under carbon dioxide enriched atmosphere for high productivity in case of bell pepper and tomato because it shows high rate of productivity, high rate of photosynthesis, high rate of productivity by utilizing high concentration of CO2. What do you call greenhouse crops or glass house crop, bell pepper and tomato, which are C3 plants. Next, temperature. Dark phase reactions are enzymatic, so it is enzymatic, so it is temperature sensitive. Of course, light reactions are also temperature sensitive, but less extent in light phase, much extent in case of dark phase. Why less extent in case of the light phase? Only few reactions are enzymatic. What are the reactions which are enzymatic in case of light phase? That is one, it is ATP synthase. That is during formation of ATP, CF0, CF1, ATP synthase. The other is NADP reductase, FNR, ferredoxin, NADP plus reductase. Only the two enzymes in case of light phase. And temperature, effect of temperature is also depend upon the growth of the habitat in which the plants are growing. Temperate plants, tropical plant. Tropical plant having the temperature optima range between 30 to 40 degrees, and temperate plants having 20 to 25 degrees centigrade. And also depend upon what it is, the habitat, the temperature also depend upon what it is, the habitat in which are they growing, tropical and temperate regions. Next, water. The effect of water as a factor is directly on the plant, indirectly on the process. That means it is more through the plant rather than on the process. How it is direct on the plant? If there is a water stress condition in case of such area or the soil, water is limiting, it leads to closure of stomata, because flaccidity of the cell leads to closure of stomata, there is no gaseous exchange. Further, due to flaccidity of the cell leads to wilting of the leaves. Once the wilting of the leaf, surface area is going to be reduced, metabolical activity also reduced, because the metabolical activity, it is intimately linked to water status. So effect of water is direct on the plant, indirect on the process. With this we completed the photosynthesis, and if you feel this approach is right, don't forget to subscribe and share to the person who is seriously preparing for NEET.